she failed to attend the mating ritual. By the next day, the Alpha King was searching for her. In the heart of the kingdom, the forests whispered with ancient magic, as if the trees themselves knew secrets no human should hear. Among these shadows moved Lyra, her heart pounding like the wings of a trapped bird. She had failed to attend the mating ritual, the ceremony that had been declared her fate since birth. And for that failure, the world itself seemed to shiver with warning. Lyra's bare feet touched the cold earth, leaving no sound, but every snap of a twig felt like a shout in the stillness. Her cloak fluttered around her, catching the wind as if it too wished to flee. She had known the ritual was dangerous, not in the way others spoke of danger, but in the way that whispered to the soul. It was a ritual that bound a human heart to a king, to power, to destiny itself. And Lyra, stubborn and unyielding, had chosen to step away. She paused near the edge of the silverwood, the trees here tall and ancient. Their roots curled like sleeping serpents, their branches tangled with the night sky. She had heard stories of travelers who had entered these woods and never returned. The shadows were alive, shifting, almost sentient. Lyra took a deep breath. "I cannot go back," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. "Not yet, not like this, not to him." The name of the Alpha King echoed in her mind, Kale. He was not just any king. He was a man of power beyond measure, a ruler of the supernatural forces that protected Valmora. His eyes were said to see not just the body but the soul. His presence commanded loyalty, fear, and awe. Lyra had met him once during the preparations for the ritual, and she remembered the weight of his gaze, the quiet strength that seemed to pull everything toward him. She had felt trapped, exposed, as if the air around her were no longer her own. That memory had driven her feet into the woods and away from the palace. Yet even in her flight, she could not escape the pull of destiny. The forest seemed to test her with every step. Branches reached out like long fingers, leaves rustling as if whispering warnings. Somewhere in the distance, an owl cried, sharp and lonely. Lyra's pulse quickened. She could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. Perhaps it was the forest, or perhaps it was him, Kale. Meanwhile, in the throne room of Valmora, the Alpha King awoke to an empty chamber. The ceremonial hall still glowed faintly with candlelight, but the seat meant for the chosen mate stood empty. His jaw tightened, and the silence of the room seemed to hum with anger and disbelief. Kale had expected fear, or perhaps even hesitation, but not defiance, not absence. Kale rose, his movements controlled yet fierce, like a storm contained within a single body. He could feel the threads of fate pulling at him, each one connected to Lyra. She had chosen to run, but he knew something he could not explain. Even as she fled, she was part of him, and he was part of her. The kingdom itself seemed to stir under the weight of her choice, the forest shifting in restless disapproval. Outside, the wind picked up, swirling around the towers of the castle. Kale's soldiers scoured the halls, preparing to search beyond the city walls, but he stopped them. No one could find her but him. No one could read the signs like he could, see the faint traces of magic that marked her path. And so, with silent authority, Kale donned his cloak, the midnight blue embroidered with silver threads that mirrored the stars. He stepped into the night, each movement precise, each step echoing command. In the woods, Lyra moved quickly, ducking beneath low branches, leaping over gnarled roots. She thought of the stories she had been told as a child, stories of people who had angered kings and faced curses beyond imagining. She thought of the prophecies, of the way her heart had always pulsed with something extraordinary, something that could shape the fate of the kingdom if only she embraced it, or destroy it if she refused. She had always feared her own power, feared what she might become if she accepted the path laid before her. Yet fear alone could not stop her. She pressed onward, deeper into the forest, where the trees grew closer together and the moonlight barely reached the forest floor. Shadows moved, shifting unnaturally, and Lyra's senses sharpened. She felt magic in the air, not her own, but something older, something watchful. A chill ran down her spine. She was not merely hiding. She was stepping into a world older than kings, older than humans, where choices carried consequences far beyond what anyone could see. Back at the edge of the Silverwood, Kale's presence became more than a whisper in the wind. The forest stirred with his power, sensing his resolve. Every leaf, every branch seemed to recognize him, bending slightly, guiding his path. He did not call out to her. He did not need to. His magic traced the faint glow of her aura, small yet stubborn, twisting through the night like a flame resisting the wind. Lyra stumbled on a root and nearly fell. She pressed her palm to her chest, struggling to calm her rapid heartbeat. The forest seemed to shift again, and she could feel it, the unmistakable presence of him. Kale was near. Her mind screamed at her to run faster, to hide deeper, but something inside her hesitated. She could not explain it, not fully. There was fear, yes, but there was also a strange pull, a curiosity she had never felt before. The idea of him searching for her, of him seeking her out despite her defiance, stirred something dangerous in her heart. Suddenly, a rustle came from behind a thicket, sharp and deliberate. Lyra froze, holding her breath. Shadows stretched toward her, and she instinctively crouched low, pressing herself against the trunk of a massive oak. The rustling grew louder, closer, until a figure stepped into the faint moonlight. Kale. His presence was overwhelming, like a force of nature. He did not speak at first. He simply looked at her, and Lyra felt as if he could see every thought, every secret fear she had ever held. His eyes, silver and fierce, met hers, and in that gaze she understood a truth she had tried to deny. She could not escape him. Not because he would take her, but because some invisible thread tied her to him, to the destiny she had fled. "Lyra," he said finally, his voice low but carrying an authority that made the forest itself seem to lean closer. "Why do you run from what is yours?" Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to argue, but words failed her. She shook her head, trying to force herself to appear stronger than she felt. I cannot. Not yet." Kale took a slow step toward her, careful, deliberate. The forest seemed to part for him, shadows bending away as if respecting his presence. "Not yet," he repeated, almost gently, though his eyes burned with an intensity that made her shiver. "Do you think the world will wait for you?" Lyra swallowed hard. She did not answer because she knew it would not. The forest had been warning her all night, and now the man herself had become a storm at her back. Every choice she had made, every act of defiance was leading her here, to this moment where fate and free will collided. For a long moment they stood in silence. The wind picked up again and the trees groaned softly, their ancient voices murmuring secrets only they could understand. Lyra felt something shift inside her, a mixture of fear, awe, and something else she could not name. Was it longing? Respect? Perhaps it was the strange recognition that, despite everything, she did not entirely want to be free from him. Then the quiet was shattered. A scream echoed from deeper within the forest, a sound that was human but tinged with something unnatural. Lyra's eyes widened. Kale's expression hardened instantly. He moved with a sudden speed that belied his calm, standing protectively in front of her. "Do not move," he commanded. The air around them shimmered with his power, subtle but undeniable, like the brush of steel on silk. Lyra felt her pulse race, both from fear and from the closeness of him. Her defiance, her escape, her solitude, all of it seemed fragile now, insignificant in the presence of his control and strength. Yet she did not step back. Something in her whispered that this was only the beginning, that the night held more than one trial for her, and that Kale, King, Alpha, Hunter, was not the only force she would need to face. The scream repeated, closer now, urgent and terrifying. Lyra looked to Kale, expecting anger or fury, but instead she saw concern. Not just for the kingdom, not just for the ritual, but for her. And for a moment, just a moment, The walls she had built around her heart trembled. Kale extended his hand, not commanding, not demanding, but offering. "Come," he said. "You cannot face this alone, not tonight, not ever." Lyra hesitated. Her heart battled her mind, desire wrestling with fear. She had fled to assert her freedom, to deny destiny, yet here it stood before her, embodied in him, inevitable and inescapable. Finally, she took a step forward, then another, until her hand met his. The connection was electric, yet strangely comforting, as if the threads of fate themselves had pulled tight. Together, they disappeared into the shadows of the forest, drawn toward the scream, toward danger, toward destiny. And somewhere deep in her chest, Lyra felt it, the undeniable truth that her life had changed forever. The night of the forbidden absence had only begun, and the Alpha King was already searching for her. The forest of Silverwood seemed alive that night, as if it could sense the presence of two powerful forces walking within its shadowed paths. Lyra and Kale moved carefully, stepping over roots and ducking beneath branches, their senses alert to every sound. The scream they had heard earlier still lingered in the distance, faint but persistent, like a call echoing from a dark, hidden place. Lyra's hand remained lightly pressed against Kale's, though she did not look at him. She was aware of the strength in his grip, the steady warmth radiating from his hand, yet she resisted the urge to lean closer. Her heart was a storm of fear and curiosity, her mind a tangle of questions about destiny, power, and the strange pull she felt toward him. Kale did not speak at first. His eyes, silver and sharp in the moonlight, scanned the forest in a rhythm that seemed both instinctual and commanding. He walked with a quiet power that made the shadows themselves seem to bend away from him. For someone who ruled with absolute authority, he was cautious now, as though he feared not the forest but what it might hold for Lyra. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "After I refused, after I ran." Kale's eyes met hers, and for a moment the forest seemed to grow still. "Because you cannot face this alone," he said, "and because your defiance does not scare me, it intrigues me." Lyra's cheeks flushed. She wanted to step back to hide her own stirring curiosity, but something in his gaze rooted her to the spot. There was no anger there, not entirely. There was power, yes, but also understanding and something softer, almost protective. She did not know what to make of it, and that confused her more than fear ever could. The sound of breaking branches echoed through the trees, and Kale tensed instantly, his senses sharpening. "Stay close," he murmured. Without waiting for an answer, he moved forward with a grace that made him seem less human, more like a predator in harmony with the forest. Lyra followed, her steps uncertain but determined, feeling the tension coil and uncoil in her chest with every movement. They came upon a clearing dimly lit by the moon breaking through the clouds. The scream had grown louder here, echoing with a strange resonance, and Lyra could see it now. A creature, caught in some invisible snare, thrashing against chains of dark magic. Its eyes were wide with terror, reflecting a faint silver glow that reminded Lyra of Kale's own. Kale's expression hardened. He knelt beside the creature, assessing the magical bindings. Lyra watched him, noting the careful precision of his movements, the way his presence seemed to command even the restless air around them. "Do not touch it," she said instinctively, though she did not know why. "I must," Kale replied softly. "Its suffering is mine to end, as is yours." Lyra's breath caught. She did not fully understand what he meant, but she felt the weight of his words, heavy and binding like a vow. She stepped closer, unable to resist, though a part of her remained on guard. Kale reached out, his hand glowing faintly with a silver light, and the chains of magic began to dissolve. The creature fell free, shaking its head as if waking from a nightmare. Kale stood, his gaze returning to Lyra. "Power like yours will attract shadows," he said quietly. "You cannot run from this world. You are already part of it, whether you accept it or not." Lyra's mind raced. "I am not ready," she said, her voice trembling. "I do not want this. I do not want to be bound to anyone, not even you." Kale's expression softened, though the intensity in his eyes remained. "Lyra," he said gently, "this is not about possession. It is about choice. But choices have consequences. Running will not save you, only delay what is inevitable." The wind whispered through the clearing, carrying a faint scent of magic and earth. Lyra's pulse quickened. She wanted to argue, to claim her freedom, but her heart whispered a truth she could not ignore. Kale's presence made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. It frightened her, yet it drew her closer at the same time. Suddenly, the forest shifted violently. A gust of wind tore through the clearing, carrying with it a swarm of shadowy figures, twisting and writhing like smoke with teeth. Lyra stumbled backward, fear gripping her like ice. Kale moved in front of her instantly, his body a shield, his silver eyes glowing with fierce light. "Stay behind me," he commanded. "Do not move unless I say." Lyra obeyed, her chest rising and falling rapidly as the shadows approached. Kale's power flared outward, forming a barrier of light that pushed the creatures back. Each figure recoiled, hissing, twisting, and then vanishing into the night. The forest fell silent again, leaving only the rustle of leaves and their own heavy breathing. Lyra's knees shook. What are they?" she whispered. "Shadows born from fear and anger," Kale explained, his voice calm but firm. "They are drawn to power like yours. They seek to test, to weaken, to tempt. You must learn to control what lies within you, or they will always find you." Lyra swallowed hard. The truth of his words sank into her bones. She had run from the ritual, from destiny, yet she had not escaped the consequences. Her life was now intertwined with forces she barely understood, and the man in front of her, Kale, was not just a king. He was a guardian, a hunter, a force of nature, and the one who could help her survive. They continued through the forest, moving cautiously but steadily. Kale remained silent for long stretches, his eyes scanning the shadows with a predator's precision. Lyra watched him from the corner of her eye, noticing the subtle tension in his shoulders, the controlled strength in his stride. She realized that beneath his power there was something vulnerable, something human, though he would never admit it. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. The forest had a way of distorting time. Finally, they reached the edge of a small clearing where the moonlight shone fully upon a river. The water was calm, reflecting the night sky like glass. Lyra knelt beside it, dipping her fingers into the cool liquid. The act was grounding, a small anchor in the storm of her emotions. Kale stood behind her, silent and still. "You are stronger than you believe," he said after a moment. "And yet, strength alone will not save you. You must understand yourself, your fears, and the power that flows through you." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes reflecting both doubt and curiosity. "And if I fail?" she asked quietly. "What then?" Kale's gaze softened, though it remained intense. "Then I will not let you fall alone," he said. "I will find a way, even if the world turns against us both." Lyra's heart fluttered. The words were a promise, a warning, and an invitation all at once. She did not know if she could trust him fully, but she felt the truth of his presence. He would protect her, guide her, and perhaps, in time, challenge her to become more than she ever imagined. As they rested briefly by the river, a rustle in the bushes drew their attention. Lyra tensed, instinctively reaching for Kale's hand. He squeezed hers, a silent reminder that she was not alone. From the shadows stepped a figure, cloaked and silent, with eyes that gleamed like polished onyx. Lyra's breath caught. She recognized the markings instantly. They belonged to the emissaries of a rival kingdom, creatures bound to dark magic and ill intent. Kale stepped forward, his silver light flaring slightly, casting long shadows across the ground. "You should not have come here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The cloaked figure smiled faintly, though it did not reach their eyes. "She is mine," the figure said, their voice like silk over steel, "and you cannot stop what is already set in motion." Lyra's heart raced. The tension between the three of them crackled through the air, thick and electric. She felt fear, yes, but also a strange thrill, a reminder that she was part of something far larger than herself, a world of power, destiny, and danger. Kale's hand tightened over hers. "You are not alone," he said again, more firmly, "and no one will take you without a fight." The figure laughed softly, fading back into the shadows with the promise of return. The warning was clear. Their journey was far from over. Lyra looked at Kale, seeing both the man and the king, the hunter and the protector. For the first time, she realized that running had never been truly about escaping him. It had been about discovering whether she could stand beside him, not behind or before, but equal in courage and heart. The night stretched on, deep and endless, but for the first time, Lyra felt a spark of resolve. She did not know what awaited her or what she might become, but she knew one thing. She could not face the shadows alone, and she could not ignore the pull of the Alpha King who had found her, even when she tried to disappear. And somewhere in the forest, the air shifted once more. The shadows lingered, restless and watching, as if the night itself waited for the next move. Lyra and Kale, hand in hand, stepped forward, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead together, yet still tested by fear, destiny, and the dangerous allure of power. The hunt had begun, and neither the hunter nor the hunted could predict who would truly emerge victorious. The night deepened, wrapping the silverwood forest in a velvet cloak of mystery. Moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting streaks of silver on the twisted roots and moss-covered stones. Lyra and Kale moved with careful steps, their senses alert to the slightest sound. Each rustle of leaves, each crack of a branch, made their hearts jump, but neither spoke. The forest had become a world of its own, a place where destiny and danger intertwined, and every step carried weight. Lyra's hand remained lightly pressed against Kale's, a silent reassurance that she was still with him, and that she had chosen, at least for now, to stay. Yet within her, fear and curiosity battled constantly. She had always believed that strength meant running from what frightened her, but now she began to understand that true strength required facing the unknown, even when it terrified her. Kale moved with a silent grace, his presence commanding yet protective. The forest seemed to recognize him, bowing subtly with every step. Lyra had never seen a man so powerful yet so attuned to the world around him. His eyes, bright as silver in the moonlight, scanned the shadows tirelessly. She had begun to notice the small things, the way he flinched at sudden movement, the way his jaw tightened when danger was near, the quiet patience that belied his fierce power. Suddenly, the forest seemed to shift. A mist rose from the ground, curling around the roots and trunks of the trees. Lyra instinctively tightened her grip on Kale's hand. The mist carried whispers, soft, almost inaudible, yet strangely familiar. Lyra shivered, feeling as if the air itself were speaking directly to her. "Do you feel it?" Kale asked quietly. His voice was low, almost a murmur, but it carried over the silence. Lyra nodded. "Yes, it feels alive." Kale's eyes narrowed. "It is," he said. "This forest is old. Older than kings, older than prophecy. It tests all who enter, seeking truth and weakness alike." Before Lyra could ask what he meant, the mist thickened, swirling around them like a living creature. Shapes began to form within it, shadowy figures that seemed both human and unreal. Lyra gasped, instinctively stepping closer to Kale. He did not move away. Instead, he raised a hand, and a faint silver light emanated from his palm, pushing the shadows back slightly. "These are spirits of the forest," Kale explained. "They appear to test you, to tempt you, to see if you are ready to embrace the power that lies within." Lyra felt her heart pound. "Ready for what?" "For the choice you have tried to deny," Kale said softly. "To accept who you are and the bond that destiny has set before us." Lyra wanted to speak, to deny, to run, but the shadows shifted suddenly, closing in around her. Their whispers grew louder, a mixture of fear, sorrow, and longing that made her chest ache. She realized then that the forest was not just a place, it was a reflection of her own heart. Her doubts, her fears, and her desires were mirrored in every shadow, every flicker of mist. Kale stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. His touch was firm but gentle, grounding her. "Do not be afraid," he said. "I will not let them harm you, but you must face them. You cannot run forever." Taking a deep breath, Lyra stepped forward into the mist. The shadows parted for her, moving like smoke, circling her, whispering her name. She felt a strange pull, as if the forest were trying to speak to the deepest parts of her soul. She faltered, her fear almost overwhelming her. "Trust yourself," Kale said, his voice steady, close to her ear. "And trust me." She did. Slowly she raised her hands, feeling a warmth spread from within her chest. The shadows reacted, recoiling slightly at the light she unknowingly projected. A surge of courage rose within her, mingled with fear, and she realized that she had power, power she had always feared to acknowledge. The shadows hissed and twisted, retreating, but they did not vanish entirely. Instead, they gathered into a single form, larger and darker than before, eyes glowing with a faint red light. It moved toward them with deliberate menace. Lyra froze, feeling panic rise again. Kale's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. "We face it together," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "Do not let fear control you." The shadow lunged forward, and Kale unleashed a wave of silver energy, pushing it back. Lyra felt a strange thrill, her heart racing, and for the first time she did not flinch. She raised her other hand instinctively, sending out a small burst of light from within herself. The shadow shrieked, faltering as if her courage itself weakened it. Kale smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and something warmer. "You are stronger than you know," he said. Lyra blushed, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. I don't know if I can control this," she admitted. "You will," Kale said softly, "and I will help you, but you must also trust your own strength. That is the only way to survive what lies ahead." The shadow finally dissipated, melting into the mist. The forest fell silent again, save for the gentle rustle of leaves. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted but alive, her chest heaving. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand lightly on her back. "You did well," he said. "Very well." Lyra looked up at him, her breath shaky. I couldn't have done it without you." Kale's expression softened, though his silver eyes still held that fierce intensity. "Perhaps," he said, "but you also faced yourself. That is far more important." For a long moment they sat together, the night pressing close around them. Lyra felt a strange mixture of relief, pride, and something more, a longing she did not fully understand. The man beside her, who was king and alpha, hunter and protector, stirred emotions she could neither name nor deny. Finally, Kale stood, offering his hand to help her up. "We must keep moving," he said. "The forest will not remain quiet forever. And there are still threats that lie ahead." Lyra rose, taking his hand. She felt the strength in his grip, the steady warmth that contrasted with the cold night. As they walked, she realized that her fear had not disappeared, it had transformed. Fear had become respect, understanding, and a cautious curiosity. And beneath that curiosity, a spark of something dangerous and thrilling, desire. Hours passed as they navigated the forest, moving deeper into its heart. The mist grew thicker, the shadows more restless, but Lyra no longer felt entirely alone. Kale's presence was a shield, a guide, and something more, an anchor in a world that had once felt too vast and too threatening. At last, they reached a small glade where moonlight spilled like silver across the ground. The air was still, almost sacred, and Lyra felt a sense of calm wash over her. She knelt beside a small pool of water, watching the moon's reflection ripple gently. Kale stood behind her, silent but attentive, and for a moment they simply existed in the quiet, connected by touch, glance, and the unspoken tension between them. "Lyra," Kale said finally, his voice low and intimate, "I need to know, will you face what comes with me? Not as a duty, not as a ritual, but as your choice." Lyra's heart fluttered. She looked at him, seeing the sincerity, the strength, and the quiet vulnerability in his gaze. I don't know," she admitted. "I am still afraid, but I feel that I want to try." Kale's expression softened into a faint, almost tender smile. "That is all I ask," he said. "The rest will follow in time." As they prepared to move again, a sudden movement in the shadows caught their attention. A dark figure emerged, cloaked in night, eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. Lyra's heart jumped, another challenge, another test. Kale stepped in front of her, his silver light flaring slightly as he readied himself. The figure spoke, its voice like silk and steel combined. "The girl belongs to fate and to me," it said. "No bond of silver or courage can protect her forever." Lyra swallowed, her hand tightening on Kale's. He did not flinch, though his eyes narrowed. "You are mistaken," he said firmly. "She is not yours to claim. And I will not allow it." The shadow hissed, vanishing into the forest, leaving a lingering sense of threat. Lyra's chest heaved. She realized that her journey was far from over. The night had tested her courage, her power, and her heart, but greater trials awaited. And through it all, the presence of Kale beside her was both a comfort and a challenge, a reminder that the bond between them was growing stronger, whether she admitted it or not. The forest seemed to sigh, the mist curling around them like gentle fingers. Lyra met Kale's gaze, feeling a strange mix of fear, admiration, and longing. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and trials, yet for the first time she felt a spark of confidence. Perhaps she could face it all, if he remained by her side. And somewhere deep in the trees, a faint whisper echoed, warning of the dangers yet to come. Lyra and Kale walked on, hand in hand, hearts intertwined, ready to face the night together. The forest waited, patient and eternal, as destiny continued to unfold around them. The night had tested them, and both had emerged changed. But the most difficult challenges and the most profound revelations still lay ahead. The first light of dawn barely touched the edge of the forest, casting the silverwood in pale, silvery blue. The mist curled around the trees like gentle fingers, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and magic. Lyra and Kale stood at the edge of a small clearing, facing a scene that made the forest itself seem to hold its breath. Before them was a figure cloaked in shadows, taller and more ominous than any they had encountered before. Its eyes glowed red like embers, and its presence carried a weight that made the air shiver. This was the emissary of the rival kingdom, the cursed being who had tracked them relentlessly, seeking to claim Lyra for their dark designs. Kale stepped forward instinctively, his silver light flaring faintly from his hand. "You will not harm her," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Leave now or face the consequences." The shadow hissed, a sound that sent a chill down Lyra's spine. "You cannot protect her forever," it whispered, voice like steel wrapped in silk. "She belongs to the fate we have chosen for her." Lyra swallowed hard, feeling fear and anger mix in her chest. For a long moment she hesitated, unsure of her own power. She had grown stronger in the forest, learned to face shadows both within and outside herself, yet this being seemed larger than any fear she had ever known. Kale placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone," he said gently. "Trust yourself. Trust the power that has grown within you." Taking a deep breath, Lyra stepped forward. Her hands trembled at first, but then she focused, recalling the lessons of the night, the shadows she had faced, the courage she had summoned, and the strange, pulsing connection to Kale that had guided her through danger. She raised her hands, and a silver light emanated from her chest, intertwining with Kale's own. The shadow screeched, stumbling backward, its form twisting and contorting. It had not expected her to stand beside him, to wield power with such confidence. Kale's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Lyra saw pride and trust in his gaze, not just command. A surge of determination coursed through her, and she knew she could no longer run from destiny. Together, they advanced. Their combined power formed a circle of silver light around the shadow, pushing it back, containing its darkness. Lyra felt a thrill of exhilaration. Fear had become courage, and courage had become strength. She realized that power was not only about magic, but about heart, will, and choice. The shadow hissed one last time before dissolving into the mist, leaving only a faint echo in the trees. Lyra's chest heaved, and Kale gently lowered his hand from hers. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced the darkness and did not falter." Lyra looked up at him, a mixture of exhaustion, awe, and relief in her eyes. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, though now she understood that she had also done it for herself. Kale's expression softened, and he extended his hand to help her steady herself. "No," he said, shaking his head slightly. "You did it because you are stronger than you ever believed, and because you chose to trust yourself. That is the true power." For a long moment, they stood together in the pale morning light, feeling the world settle around them. Lyra realized how much she had changed. The fear that had once dominated her heart had been replaced with courage, and her defiance had transformed into understanding and purpose. She was no longer the girl who had fled the mating ritual. She was a young woman who had faced shadows, both external and within herself, and had emerged stronger. Kale spoke again, his voice gentle but firm. "Lyra, the forest has tested you, but there is one more choice you must make. Not out of duty, not out of fear, but out of your own will. Will you stand with me? Will you accept the bond not as a command, but as a partnership?" Lyra's heart fluttered. She looked at him, really looked, at the man who had been hunter and protector, teacher and companion. She saw the weight of his responsibilities, the loneliness that came with power, and the sincerity in his eyes. And in that moment, she understood that choice was not about submission, but about trust and mutual respect. I will," she said quietly, yet firmly. "Not because I must, but because I want to." Kale's eyes softened, and a faint smile curved his lips. "Then our covenant begins," he said, his voice carrying a resonance that seemed to echo through the forest. The light around them pulsed softly, a symbol of the bond forming, not through ritual alone, but through courage, trust, and choice. The forest seemed to exhale, the mist curling gently around them like a blessing. The shadows that had once haunted the woods no longer lingered, retreating into the depths from which they had come. The morning sun began to break through the trees, scattering golden light across the forest floor. It was as if the world itself acknowledged the courage and unity of Lyra and Kale. For the first time in days, Lyra allowed herself to relax, to feel the warmth of the sun on her skin and the steady presence of Kale beside her. She realized that love, like power, was not about control or possession, but about trust, respect, and shared strength. She had found that within herself, and she had found it mirrored in Kale. Kale took a step closer, his hand brushing lightly against hers. "Lyra," he said softly, "you are extraordinary, not because of magic alone, but because of your heart. Your courage, your choice, your willingness to face the unknown, these are what make you remarkable." Lyra felt a warmth rise in her chest. I never thought I could be strong enough," she admitted. "But with you, I feel like I can face anything." Kale's gaze softened, and he reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You can," he said simply, "and together we can face whatever comes. The world is not without danger, but it is also full of possibility, and you have already proven that you are ready." As they began to walk back toward the edge of the forest, Lyra felt a sense of peace she had never known. The journey had been harrowing, filled with fear, uncertainty, and shadows, yet it had also revealed truths she had never seen before. The strength within herself, the power of trust, and the bond that could exist between two people who faced the world together. They reached a hill that overlooked the kingdom, the first rays of sunlight touching the towers and streets below. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the wind on her face, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe in a future that was not dictated solely by fate. She had chosen her path, faced her fears, and embraced her power, and she had done so not alone but with Kale by her side. Kale stood beside her, his hand brushing lightly against hers. "The kingdom awaits us," he said quietly. "But now we walk as equals, not bound by ritual alone, but by choice, trust, and courage." Lyra looked at him, seeing the depth of his strength and the tenderness hidden beneath it. She realized that the Alpha King, who had seemed so untouchable, was also vulnerable, capable of trust and love. And in that moment, she understood that their bond was not just about destiny. It was about understanding, respect, and the willingness to face the unknown together. As they descended the hill toward the kingdom, a faint shimmer of silver light traced the edges of the trees behind them. The forest had been their test, their teacher, and now their blessing. Shadows still lingered in the world, but they no longer felt threatening. Instead, they were reminders of the trials they had overcome and the courage they had found within themselves. Lyra squeezed Kale's hand lightly, feeling the steady pulse of his strength. "I am ready," she said softly. Kale nodded, his silver eyes reflecting the rising sun. "Then we face the future together," he said. The kingdom stretched before them, bathed in the golden light of morning. The challenges of the past nights had forged them, shaping courage from fear, trust from uncertainty, and love from understanding. Lyra and Kale stepped forward into the new day, hand in hand, hearts aligned, ready to face whatever trials the world might bring. As they disappeared into the city, the silverwood whispered behind them, ancient and eternal. Its trees swayed gently, shadows dancing in celebration, as if the forest itself acknowledged the courage, choice, and unity of two souls who had faced the darkness together, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The Alpha King had found his mate, not through force or ritual, but through trust, courage, and the quiet power of the heart. And Lyra, who had once fled from destiny, had embraced her strength and choice, becoming not just a survivor, but a force to be reckoned with, a partner in the journey ahead. Though shadows still lingered in the world, they no longer carried fear. They were reminders of trials faced and conquered. And as Lyra and Kale walked into the golden light of the kingdom, they knew that together they could face anything. The forest, the shadows, and the night had tested them, and in their hearts a new dawn had risen.